Hey guys, Sarak here, and today I'm going to bring you my branded Predaplant Despia deck for my next deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! On a Budget. So, this deck was heavily inspired by Rev's Cards Playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Properly series, where he built a similar deck, so please check that out after you've looked at this. And the deck has had lots of reprints over the past couple of months, which means it's so much cheaper to build now. So, let's get into it. We start with 1 Aluba the Boober of Duba. If he's normal or special summoned, you can add 1 branded spell or trap, not despia, branded. It is a Dawn of Majesty EU printing. They had a misprint on there that says despia, not branded. This card searches branded fusion. It searches branded fusion, that's what it does. From your deck to your hand. If a fusion monster you control is destroyed by battle or leaves the field due to a card effect while it's in your graveyard, target an effect monster your opponent controls, summon this card and negate the targeted monster's effects. You can only use 1 effect per turn, and only once that turn. You get to summon this card back or search. You do not get to do both. If you summon this card back with its effect, you will not get to search branded fusion. Is that clear? Good. 1 Despian Tragedy. If this card is sent to the graveyard or banished by a card effect, you can add a Despia monster from your deck to your hand, except itself. Or you can banish this card from your graveyard, target a branded spell trap in the graveyard, and set it to your field. 1 effect per turn, and once that turn. Again, you get to search or you get to recycle. Do not try do both. The final Despia piece in the main deck is Ad Libitum of Despia. During your main phase, you can make all monsters currently on the field gain attack equal to their level by 1 times 100. And then if this card in the hand or field is used as fusion, you can send it and send to the graveyard or banish, target a Despia monster or a level 8 or higher fusion monster except itself, summon it. You can only use each effect once per turn. This one you can use both. Don't ask me why. We then have 2 copies of Fallen of ALBAZ. You have to play Fallen of ALBAZ. It's the material for most of your fusions. You need to play it. Sometimes the Super Poly effect comes up, sometimes it doesn't. 3 Keeper of Dragon Magic. This card also searches branded fusion. Does some other things as well, like special summoning Fallen of ALBAZ, and it can summon it in face down defense position. You can still fuse with face down defense position monsters, so don't worry about that. It can bring back an ALBAZ which you can then fuse with. But most of the time you are just using this to search branded fusion. 3 Predaplant Orpris Scorpio. If it's normal or special summon, send 1 monster from hand to graveyard, summon 1 Predaplant from your deck. Except itself. Big Ash Magnet, but searches you any of the Predaplant aspect of your deck on summon, which gets you to Cobra or any of the other things, so it gets you fusion spells or fusion summons when you need them. It can also be special summoned by Predapractice to start that off without requiring a normal summon. We then have the 1 Cobra to go with it. Cobra can search Super Poly. It can also search branded fusion. Shock horror. Note, has to be summoned by a Predaplant monster effect. Does not work with Predapractice. You do not want to draw this card. If you draw this card, you are very, very sad. Three copies of Predaplant Biblisp. If it goes to the graveyard, you can add 1 Predaplant monster from your deck to your hand, except itself. If a monster with a Predator counter is on the field, special summon this card from the graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. Gives you some nice searching and some extension. 1 copy of Predaplant Triantis. Lets you fuse from your Pendulum Zone if you're making a Dark Fusion monster, which, spoilers, 90% of our extra deck is. And then if it goes to the graveyard or extra deck, you can then place Predator counters on your opponent on the field, equal to the number of monsters you control. The other pendulum is Predaplant Froggy. This lets you fusion as its pendulum effect, and then if it goes to the graveyard or is added to the extra deck face up, you can add 1 dark pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, like the Triantis, if it's in the extra deck. We then have 2 copies of Predaplant Chlamydia Sundew. Important card, lets us fuse and can also fuse stuff from our opponent's field if it has Predaplant Predator counters on it. Helps us break the board in that way. Also makes all Predator counter monsters be treated as dark for your fusion summons. 1 Stay Sailor Romarin. Romarin, when it's sent to the graveyard, this is our main light target. When it goes to the graveyard, we can send a level 5 or lower plant monster from deck or extra deck to grave. We're dumping Biblisp usually with this. It lets us go through Albion lines rather than Lubellion lines if we need to. So it's just another nice light option we have in the deck that also gives us access to our Predaplant plays. For our spells, we are playing 3 Branded Fusion. This card does what the deck needs. Ash is less popular right now, so Branded Fusion is much better than it was. Summon 1 fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz from your extra deck using 2 monsters from hand, deck, or field as fusion material. Doesn't get more simple than that. Dump Fallen of Albaz, dump Biblisp, dump Fallen of Albaz, dump Romarin, dump Fallen of Albaz, dump Tragedy. They're the main targets we'll be dumping. That's what Branded Fusion does. Gets us to Lubellion and then gets us to Mirror Jade. 3 copies of Predapractice. This is a nice starter if our normal summon gets hit and lets us get into the Predaplant engine without using up our normal summon. Summon a Predaplant monster from hand, then add a Predap card from your deck to your hand. Then locks you into fusions. We only play fusions in our extra deck. The rest doesn't matter. Lets us summon something like Orpris Scorpio from our hand. Starts searching like Cobra to get Branded Fusion into play. And also searches a Predap card, which for us is Predaplanning. 3 copies of Branded Opening. This card searches Aluba. Note it discards as an effect, so you will get your Despian Tragedy effect from discarding it. And also don't forget its protection effect, where you can banish it to protect a fusion monster from being destroyed. 3 copies of Super Polymerization, the best board breaking card in the game right now. This card is one of the most expensive components of the deck, but it is really vital and lets us play such a flexible extra deck to out really gummy boards. The fact that it can't be responded to is just so good. Two copies of Branded in red gives us some recursion and some more fusion summoning on our opponent's turn. We're not playing Guardian Chimera in this build because of the price, but I would definitely consider picking one up if you have access to one. Finally, we have our 3 power one-offs. We have an instant fusion, which lets us get into the Predaplant fusion monster for free. Called by the Grave, which I could do an entire 15-minute video on, saying how it doesn't just stop hand traps. Called by the Grave is much more than a hand trap stopper. And then finally, Foolish Burial obviously lets us dump Biblisp, lets us dump Despian Tragedy. Just helps us unlock some hands that can be really, really gummy and may not do very much by themselves. Or just extra extension. If we've already been through a Biblisp line, we can dump Tragedy and search something else, like Ad Libitum. For our traps, we play the 1 Branded Banishment. This is Super Poly in trap form. Summon a Despia or a level 8 higher or fusion monster from your graveyard, then fusion summon with it and any material from on the field. And then finally we have Predaplanning. Send a Predaplant count monster from the deck to the graveyard, like Biblisp. Place 1 Predator counter on each face-up monster on the field, and if you do, those monsters become level 1. If you fusion summon a dark monster while this card is in the graveyard, banish this card, target a card on the field, destroy it. Really, really good card. Gives us interruption with Dragostopelia on board. Lets us blanket negate an entire board, because Dragostopelia is a continuous effect, and gives us an extra pop. For the fusion deck, we will begin with the ALBAZ stuff, which you have all seen before. We're playing 2 Mirror Jade. Mirror Jade is a quick effect non-targeting banish for very little cost. Often we recoup the cost because we send an Albion and then just get to add branded in red or similar to our hand, or set it, and also nukes the board if it goes. Very, very self-explanatory. 2 copies of Lubellion. This is the dark monster target. This is the one we're normally summoning. Remember, you have to discard to fuse with it, and it fuses by shuffling. 2 Albion. This is our light target and our best Mirror Jade target because it lets us search branded spells and traps. So we want at least one for fusing and one for sending. And remember, this one fuses by banishing. For the rest of the fusions, we have 2 Dragostopelia. Dragostopelia applies a continuous effect to the field where the activated effects of your opponents are negated if they have predator counters on. So if you put a predator counter on something, then in the same chain summon a Dragostopelia, its effect applies as soon as the Dragostopelia hits the field. That monster's effect is being negated. You don't have to activate anything else. So Dragostopelia can be really, really creative with when you summon it to stop your opponent from activating an effect. It can also put a counter on something. And it's very easy to summon with Super Poly. 1 Starving Venom, best generic Super Poly target. 2 Dark Monsters, very, very easy to summon. Can also help end games and also nukes the board if it's destroyed, which can also be very, very funny if your opponent hasn't read it. 1 Starving Venom Predapower Dragon. This is, again, always treated as Predaplant, gives us a negate, which this deck really, really lacks, and has a very nice recursion effect, letting us summon a dark monster from the graveyard. And it's also just huge. It beats over Tearlament's Kaleido Heart with the field spell on board, which is also very, very useful. 1 Predaplant Tritheoveratum. This card gains attack equal to the original attack of all monsters on the field with a predator counter. When your opponent summons a monster from the extra deck while you control this fusion summon card, negate the summon and destroy the monster. If your opponent controls a monster with a predator counter, you can summon this card from your graveyard in defense position. It keeps coming back. It negates summons. Remember, that means they won't be able to bring them back later with a card like Sprite Elf. It's just a generally phenomenal card and really good at breaking apart massive boards with Super Poly. And can also be summoned with things like Branded in red. Predaplant Ambulance, or Ambulo Miladies, I don't know. If it's fusion summoned, add a Predaplant monster or Predap, spell trap, graveyard, or extra deck to your hand. You can target 1 monster your opponent controls with a Predator counter, or 1 monster you control, tribute it, and summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck. This lets you get to Darlingtonia as well, or any of the other Predaplants that you might need. It can tribute opponent's monsters with a Predator counter if you've managed to put some on already, helping you break the board. And it's an instant fusion target. It does so much for the deck. Finally, to finish off, we have 2 copies of Masquerade. This card is in here because it's now A, really cheap, B, easy to make, and C, if you're playing against a deck like Danger Tier, and you can make 2 of these, they just cannot play the game because they will burn themselves out. A risky card, I don't like boards that just end on 1 of this, unless they're backed up, but 2 of this can be very, very difficult for your opponent to play through. And then finally, to round things off, we have another Super Poly target in Muddragon of the Swamp. This also lets us protect our monsters, like Aluba, who are activating on field, and from stuff like Imperm. So, that is the deck. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this content, want to see more budget and new player-oriented content, please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.